to say this right now. Mamdani fucking won. Mamdani got it with a over 10% lead, it looked like, in the end there. It might have been closer to 8%, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong on there, because I'm often wrong on those things. But I am hoping, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I am hoping that this will bring some new energy into the Democratic Party. They will see that oldie fogey that really likes status quo and corporate money does not work as well as telling people who already cannot afford to eat that you've got their backs. Turns out, showing people that you've got their backs in a crisis is going to do way more than status quo. Progress only says 1 as a majority, it looks like. No spoiler calls. Yeah, no recounts, none of that shit. It's looking like we have been doing fantastically right now. The pendulum is, as of this moment, definitely swinging further to the left, and that is wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful. Seeing more local elections that are being taken over by Democrats, by people who you may not like the Democratic Party, and that's entirely okay, and I agree with you in most regards. But at the same time, if you had to have a choice between the Republican being in charge of your health care and the Democrat being in charge of your health care, at least the Democrat is going to be trying to work a little bit more for you instead of the corpo. They may be bought by the same people, but the influence is not necessarily the same in that regard. And sometimes you get far more left-leaning Democrats like Mamdani, who do not have the same stink of the party on them as you find elsewhere. Fennec says, lesser of two evils when one is extra, extra evil. That's basically the issue. Like, you are doing lesser of two evils. And anytime somebody wants to say, well, why would you propose working with the DNC? Why would you propose any of that? Why would you celebrate Democrats winning? Because I like people being able to afford food. And I think it's very hard to have a conversation about, material class struggle when nobody is able to eat in the first fucking place. So getting somebody in that is at least going to try to take care of that, who is at least going to try to do what they can to help, who at least has their heart in the right place, is going to do way more good than just sitting there and just banging the same drum of never Democrat, never Democrat, never Democrat. And I think we also need to learn the lesson from this, that Democrats, by and large, win when there is voter turnout. So our enemy may be, in many ways, shapes, and forms, messaging and marketing, but part of that is going to be motivating people to actually come out and vote at all. Because when there is Democratic turnout, there are Democratic wins, as evidenced by the fact that we had a whole conversation that went over the fact that there are about 800, and I forget where it was, but I think it was in Ohio, there are about 800,000 registered Democratic voters, and about 1.1-ish million registered Republican voters. Now, that may seem to you on its surface like Democrat voters are not in the area, but that's not what that actually means, because that's omitting the information that there are over 5 million unregistered voters in that area. And when you realize that, oh, well, if the majority of people tend to lean more progressive, which is true by and large. A lot of people on social media can be very, very loudly anti-progressive, whatever, but by and large, people do lean more progressive as a unit, because the world tends to work better when you, I, and everybody around us are able to live comfortably together, and progressive policies do lead to that. So when you realize that, most people are going to lean progressive, and of those people that lean progressive, you have a bunch of people who just aren't voting, how do you solve that problem? Well, you get them to vote. You get them to come out. You get them to actually do the thing where they end up popping out and giving their vote to where it needs to go, wherever that may be. yeah, you're going to get more Republicans voting by and large when you enfranchise as many voters as possible, when you make it as easy as possible for all of them to vote, but you will invariably get more left-wing people in because the country by and large leans more progressive. So what are our lessons here? Motivate people to actually go out and do the fucking thing. Apparently, the Georgia Trade Commission also leaned rather blue, which is incredible news. I know that Hank Green put out a whole video about how people are having way more money sucked out of their bank accounts by power companies here in Georgia because the Trade Commission that is supposed to help regulate the prices from the power company are basically in the hands of Republicans. And that seems to have rung well with viewers because we did actually end up having a bunch of Democratic seats a bunch of seats get taken by Democrats, swapped over blue. It's what we wanted. It's what we needed. It's what most of us in Georgia will likely benefit from. I know that I've told you guys what my power bill has been lately. It's been over $500. Why? Well, my power bill says it's because of cooling costs. It costs at least half of that to cool my house. I don't believe that, but that's what I'm told on the website, so must be true, at least in some way, right? Man, these things are really easy to cheese. They can't hit you if you jump over things. That's great. That's fantastic. Said, let's see here. Bagosi says, from what I've seen, the people of America, especially the younger people, are starting to lean less blue or red and more anti-capitalist, which is really encouraging. Exactly. The more people you can get to realize the system is fundamentally broken, the more avenues for fixing that system that you will find. One avenue for fixing that system, for changing it, is making sure that people recognize it is broken in the first place, and when they do, getting those people to go out and vote for the more progressive candidate. Because in the primaries, that is when the DNC fights its hardest. Did you see when Jamal Bowman was running against fucking AIPAC money? When Bernie Sanders was running against Hillary? The DNC will do everything in their power to keep even a social democrat out of office if they can, if it will affect the power structure of the entire party. How do you change that? You start getting people involved at a local level, supporting each other and creating a network that is able to throw their weight at lower level politicians. And ignore that my face just did that, because that is what happens when I use the shift button, apparently. The more people who are encouraged to be anti-capitalist, to have no respect for our system, are going to be willing to do more things to undermine our system. And getting involved at local elections is one of those things that can fully undermine a broken system. Because it gets very hard for Congress to do anything of worth when every lower level politician under them, whose decisions have a direct effect on the people who they govern, is against the people in Congress. You can force those waves to fuck over the established people who are in Congress, who are not helping us and who are bought. You can usurp a ton of that power by yanking it out from the local level up. This is a good thing. I see this all as an absolute win. Nenegoblin says, so grand scheme, any of these elections beyond Prop 40 going to help nationwide? It's greater for the people that are municipalities. These Dems are winning, but it won't really help like someone who's in the deep red like me. Actually, no. Incorrect. Let me give you some hopium. Let's use Mamdani as an example. What does Mamdani winning against an established Democrat tell you? It tells you, and it tells the party at large, that those tides are shifting. And when those tides shift, you get more powerful candidates who are more able to undermine and usurp the Republican candidates. because the Republican candidates have gotten really good at playing ye old political game and even adapting to the current new political climate. But when you get newer blood in there that is far more adaptable than the older Democrats that have been in the party, you get people who are able to deal with those politicians far easier, those used car salesman scumfucks. And it's super easy to ignore that by saying, well, that politician was elected somewhere else, that doesn't help me. You have to be able to think big picture. You have to be able to think, hey, while yes, this politician was elected somewhere that is not your state, what effect does moving that tide have on the elections in your state? It may not stop your pain points in this exact moment. And that sucks. And that's not going to be great. But you do not live in just this exact moment. You live in every potential moment that you will have throughout the rest of your life. So having things that are set up to make those moments later better is a good thing. Yeah, it may not help you right now in this exact moment, but it turns a tide that can help you in the future. And that is better than not doing anything. In fact, it's really good. Nitro says, sorry, Suris in chat, you have to excuse me. I'm still incredibly bitter and resentful over last year because it was an easily winnable election against a traitor. Yeah, understandable. And, truth be told, Harris was really bad in regards to support of Israel. She definitely seemed like she was going to be a very pro-Israeli president who would allow more of the genocide in Gaza against the Palestinians to take place. Absolutely. But the other side of that is that we are not going to find a perfect politician. The further you prod a politician, the easier it's going to be to find the area where that politician fails you and the things you want to work for. It's like being a communist and being friends with a socialist. I myself am a socialist. I think that the workers owning the means of production is a pretty neat fucking thing. But if you get a standard communist who believes that we need to abolish the state, that we need to abolish money, that we need to abolish class entirely as a concept, that person and that socialist are going to have a point of divergence. They will eventually have a moment where neither of them see eye to eye on political discourse. But while capitalism is still a thing, they are allies, and they should be allies. In a world where the only option is Harris versus Trump, I'm going to begrudgingly throw my vote at Harris. I don't want to. I want someone else. I want a Bernie. I want an AOC. I want somebody who is going to fight for the rights of my girlfriend to fucking live. That's what I'm going to want. I recognize, though, that there's going to be people who are not Trump, who are just going to be better than Trump. With Biden, that's effectively what we got. Because he said, our choices in the last election were evil corporate Zionist Nazi who wants all POC enslaved, eliminated, or Arabs genocided, or the exact same thing, but with a red tie. The election was trash. I do not think that that is accurate. I do not. So, to give you perspective, my partner is trans. So, I do not see the choices that we had the same way you do. I can't, because what you are doing is reducing everything that both politicians stood for to one pain point issue. But one of those politicians was more willing to allow people like my girlfriend to exist and live without having her rights stripped away. That is a material difference to me. There will always become a point of divergence between you and other leftists and you and politicians. There will always be a point where y'all stop seeing eye to eye. And you can even have a point that is your non-negotiable, and that is entirely understandable. But to say that both are exactly the same, I think reeks of a certain naivete. And I don't mean that to be insulting, but that is how I see it. Because there are aspects of Harris that were good and would have been better for people who mean literally the world to me. Bugozzi says a lot of people in San Fran also believed Harris could be moved that way. She was named top cop. Okay, cool. So you've dismissed everything I said. That's fine. I don't have a problem with you dismissing it. All I can do is give you my experience and my perspective. Whether or not you internalize that, that's your own business. You and I don't have to see eye and eye on everything. We absolutely do not. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, there's always going to be a point of divergence, and that point of divergence is entirely valid. I think, though, the point you and I can agree on easily, beyond a shadow of a doubt, you and I can agree that she was not the best choice. That Harris was the default choice. We picked Harris because she had access to DNC money that technically, legally, another candidate did not have. The correct choice would have been for Biden to not try to run at all, because that would have freed up that spot for anyone instead of just the person who happened to be able to get DNC money. But I think it's really easy to get jaded. It's really easy to get upset. It's really easy to fist pump at the air. It is far harder to build. Bugozzi said, yeah, Harris was the default choice, and that's what pisses me off. We weren't allowed a good choice. Correct. Based on the rules of what we had for the election, she was the one who legally had access to DNC money, or the money that had been raised up to that point. She was the one who had access to that campaign money. And I think that's ultimately what led to the decision to run Harris that we did. Nitro says the problem is we did have choices, but they sucked. No, not really. We actually didn't. So remember that when Biden decided to run, when he started earning his money on his platform, on his ticket, no other candidate has legal access to using those funds for their campaign. But uniquely, because Harris was running as effectively as vice president, she got access to those funds as effectively an extension of Biden's campaign. Now, I may not be wording this exactly how the mechanics of this worked, but that's effectively what happened. Other candidates would not have access to the campaign funds that had already been ran up, and at that point, you're fighting a huge uphill battle. And as far as the third-party choices go, those aren't actual choices. As long as we have first past the post voting, third-party votes are not votes. They are wasted votes because they are votes that cannot win. Bugozzi says Biden was an old school Dixiecrat. Harris is, well, I've said that part. Trump is, oh, holy shit, no. On the other hand, we can do better, which is what Suris was saying earlier. Despite me being an old angry guy, I fully agree with that message. And there's the point where I think we can agree. Like, I'm not going to sit here and try to sell you on Harris because I can't sit here and sell myself on Harris. I can sell myself only on pragmatism, on like a choice that is available to me when all other choices have been exhausted by material reality. That ain't great. That's not something you ever want to have to say. You never want to have to say that you are exhausted of choices in a fucking democracy. We should be drowning in good choices in a democracy. Instead, we get a handful. Nitro says, my blood runs cold when I see to what I presume to be VTubers siding with the right. Don't those people and their fans know that maggots hate their guts? So here's the thing, though. A lot of VTubers like to be little shitposty edgelords. I know, because I am one. And by and large, the group that is far more friendly to little shitposty edgelords, and people who are apolitical but certainly have some scathing words about feminism, the side that is very friendly towards that kind of rhetoric is the right, and has been the right for a very long time. Now, this is one of the reasons why I think that it's good, despite me having disagreements with Vosh, I think it's good that he does what he does. Because despite misgivings that I've had with him in the past, that I've talked with him about myself, and even there was a misogyny video where I actually, like, straight up did a video on him going, yeah, I'm not really fully on board with this. I see what you're meaning, but I don't agree. I do think having people who are willing to be that flippant with their language, it will give people an onboarding to the greater left that they otherwise would not have. And I think the utility from that cannot be understated. We are at a point in time right now where instead of being an Ouroboros that purity tests each other as hard as we possibly can, we need to be a larger tent that is willing to accept people despite their faults, because the alternative is sending them to either a place of uselessness in some third party where they will accomplish nothing, or going to the right where they will be further radicalized. If there is a point where they have a choice in two areas for a path to take, we should be providing a path to the left. Old Gus says, we can't undo radicalism by being radical in the opposite direction unless the plan is revolution. We do that by coalition building and candidates with wide support until the opposite side extremists become uncompetitive and politically irrelevant. And then we can push for a more radical movement in our direction. I halfway agree. I believe as a coalition, we should have several voices. I believe the politicians that we put forward should be more radical. That would be my only pushback on that. And it's not even fully pushback. It's agreeing, but with a caveat that I think is important. Bagosi says, my version of my leftism, I think socialism is the first step in a really long process that ends with us all being a lot happier and longer lived. Yeah. And you know what? I will say this a billion times. When the point comes where we have eliminated the power consolidation of capital and handed the power of democracy to the workers in such a way that they can self-actualize as a class instead of being beholden to the power of capital, when we hit that point, and I believe we can, if that is the moment that our paths diverge politically, then I will consider it an accomplishment. And I'll be interested to see whatever endeavors come from that afterwards. And that's not just aimed at any one person in the chat. That's for anybody who is radically further left than I am. I'm not going to sit here and say that, that person's version of leftism is wrong unless it has, the inklings of authoritarianism that I ain't super fond of. What I will say is, when we hit that point where our paths no longer cross, then I wish you Godspeed. Bagosi said, we can't just let it all burn down and then rebuild. We have to do the rebuild part right now. That's what Kropotkin talked about in Conquest of Bread. Weird. That's the problem of bread. That's literally, by and large, that is the problem of bread that Kropotkin talked about in Conquest of Bread. The nasty habit of revolutions is one of engaging in incredible violence and tearing down everything, including the systems that keep people alive. And then when there is no one to supply the bread because the systems for supplying the bread were dismantled, the power vacuum exists. It gets taken away by some random fucking nobility. And then you end up exactly where you were afterwards, but you had 10 years of people starving, so they're really mad at your movement for fucking everything up. You've got to make sure there's something better for people, not just on the horizon, but in the fucking welcome package. Lenari says, if part of communism is to abolish the state, I don't think anyone practices communism. So communism, in its short, is a stateless, classless, moneyless society. Many people would consider that an unrealistic utopia. Whether or not it's an unrealistic utopia is immaterial to me. The people fighting for that tend to also be fighting on my side on social issues. They tend to also be fighting on my side against capitalism. They tend to also be fighting on my side against fascism. Whether or not they can achieve those goals ain't my problem, ain't my circus, ain't my monkeys, ain't my purview. Whether we're fighting the same fight up to a certain point, that's where my purview is. That's where I care. That's where I have opinions. That's where I'm willing to expend my energy to make that fight more realistic to win. See, old Gus. Bagosi says, in any revolution, for every 10 soldiers, you need 100 support crew keeping people fed, clothed, in medical care, and everything else. So many people think revolution is the big old fighty bit. We need people who know how to grow gardens, make clothes, treat wounds, heal the sick. Exactly. And it should also be noted, Demortal says, didn't you say the same thing the other night? It's almost like things that I really believe in are things I'll utter again. I want to piggyback off that, Bagosi. Do you want to know one of the easiest ways to win somebody on the right to your side? Give them food. I promise you, your conversations with them get way easier when you're not only breaking bread with them, but you're breaking bread that you baked. That person may think that every single political idea that you have is garbage dog shit, but you're sitting at the same table, and you came with the food. So they're at least going to hear you out to a point. And that's way more progress than most people make in those conversations. Lenari says, is that how Mar-a-Lago works? Yeah. Hosting a party and having guests come to the party is how you start conversations with people that move mountains. Nitro says, out of curiosity, Suris, is there any chance of you coming back to live stream on YouTube? You're missed there. So right now, no, because I am not a large enough content creator to split my audience in two areas, and I do not have a website where two sides of my viewership can exist simultaneously in a single place to allow me to do that. If we start getting to the point where there's like 500, 600, 700 people viewing on Twitch, then yeah, I might start splitting the stream back up over to YouTube as well. But for the time being, that does not seem to be the prudent thing to do. Keanu Neutral Bart says, I mean, that's kind of like what Zohran did with Trump voters. You mean go to where they are and have conversations with them like a real human being? Yeah, it's almost like that works. It's a fantastic thing to do. Said it's a valid strategy and we see it work in both directions. Yup. And I believe that any weapon that is good enough for my enemy to use is a weapon that's good enough for me to consider. There are weapons of the enemy that perfectly encapsulate the types of things that we should throw away. Racism, division, anger. Well, anger is a tool, but that's a different conversation. But there are plenty of tools that are incredibly useful that we should not throw away merely because Republicans have used them. Because he says, I think I needed these conversations and pushbacks on my views. Thanks, everyone. I wish I could have engaged with it a little more when everybody was on, but again, I wasn't the host, and I wasn't about to take over to have the conversations with chat. That said, luckily I have been recording this whole thing, so this will be fun for K-Fox to edit, I suppose. Fun little post-election discussion about strategy and theory and shit from a guy who hasn't read enough theory and still has pretty loud opinions about it. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.